My fellow Americans and citizens throughout the world. I feel like the president sitting in front of the Oval Office windows, right? Just me? Hey, I'm Brian with Next Level Gardening. If you're looking to join an online garden community that offers tips, tricks, and support to help you take your gardening to the next level, you're in the right place. Get started now by clicking subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss anything. Now let's get sowing. So I am indoors today because it is in the mid to upper 90s. And as much as I have enjoyed breaking my back and killing myself outside, creating the new terraced vegetable garden, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you haven't gone over to our Next Level Homestead channel, I'll put a link down below. But I've been creating our brand new vegetable garden here on our new homestead. But I'm glad today and the next few days are hot, too hot to be out there doing that because my body needed a rest. So today is the day that I sow my fall garden seeds. And I just have to take a moment and just tell you how much especially if you've never done a fall garden before, I just want you to give it a try. You've gotten this far, you're watching this video, maybe you're on the fence, just do it. If you're tired and worn out from summer gardening, I'm telling you right now, fall gardening is so much more fun because it's more pleasant outside, there's less pests, less diseases, it's easier. I promise you. So just, even if you start a small one, just to dip your toe in, you will not regret it. You will prefer, probably, fall gardening to summer gardening, and you'll have one every fall from now on. So in the last video, I walked you through grow light setups, finding out your first frost date, how to count back and make sure that you've got enough time for certain crops, which crops are more frost hardy. So go back and watch that video if you haven't already. I'll link it down below in the video description. So I'm not going to go through all of that in this video. In this video, I'm going to be going through different types of things you can sow your seeds in, the planting medium, we're actually going to get started sowing, and which plants actually prefer to be sown indoors in something like this, or if they don't like that and they like to be sown directly in the garden. So let's start out with what types of mediums that you can grow in. So one of the most popular, especially here in the United States and Canada, is peat. Now, peat is kind of a hot button issue depending where you are in the world. If you are in UK, Europe, anywhere over there, peat is something that is actually outright banned in certain places, but it is endangered. Peat bogs are in danger of becoming extinct. And that is because over the millennia in Europe, peat bogs have been farmed primarily first for heat, and then in probably the last 100 years or so for gardening purposes. And it has become over farmed. And again, they are really trying to conserve now by banning peat in gardening. Now in the United States and Canada, I'm not sure other parts of the world, we get our peat from the Canadian peat bogs, which are enormous. And they're doing a really good job up there in terms of what I can tell from my research in keeping it sustainable. Now, sustainable means you are not taking from the environment faster than it can reproduce. So in Canada, because they have such vast peat bogs and the peat industry is committed to preserving those peat bogs, they're only farming a very small amount. Now it does take 1,000 years for peat to replenish, but the farming area is so small compared to the peat bog that every year more peat is produced in those bogs than is taken out. So as of right now, according to my research, it is sustainable. So I do use Peat Products. I tried some Coco Core last spring and it was pretty good. In fact, I think I might mix the two from now on. But right now, because of the move, I was not able to get Coco Core in time for planting. So at this point, I'm just going to be using peat. You can use coco coir. Coco coir comes from, you can get it on the internet. It comes in a compressed brick. You mix it, you put it in water, it soaks up all the water and becomes a very nice fluffy planting medium. You can also use just indoor potting mix that you can get from the garden center. Another way to do peat rather than filling it up in a container is to do peat pellets, and they come in a couple of different sizes. They're very small compressed discs of peat with a biodegradable netting around them, and when you put them in water, they soak that water up and become plantable. So you just put a little hole in the top, put your seed in there, keep it moist, and you can take that peat pellet right from whatever tray you've got it growing in inside, put it right in the ground. You don't have to take the biodegradable netting off. However, I have found that it does not biodegrade in one season. It takes a while, so you might want to either loosen it or take it off completely before you plant it. And that kind of transitions us in, because there's no container for that. It's its own self-contained thing, which is great for seeds that don't like to be transplanted. So for instance, carrots, peas, they don't like to be taken out. They don't like their roots disturbed very much in the transplanting process. And so peat pellets work really well for those. If you have a short season and you got to get these planted before you can outside, peat pellets work really well for that because they barely know they've been taken from inside to outside. There's no disturbance of the roots. Something like this, which is a pot made out of peat, compressed peat, is good for that as well, because you can plant this whole peat pot in the ground. It will disintegrate and the roots will grow right through it. Now, when I mentioned these last spring, I had a lot of people say they've tried these and they actually developed a mold or mildew issue, and they started to break down before they were actually ready to plant out. I can see that where that would be an issue. I did not have that issue because I did not let them sit in water all the time, so that might be one of the things that you have, one of the problems you're having. Too much humidity, if you have a dome on them after they're growing, which I'll get into in a minute, that might be a problem as well, or just letting them be in here too long before you have to plant them out. So if you've had a problem with these for those reasons, maybe try them again or just use another method. Other containers that you can reuse red Solo cups, you can reuse garden center 6-packs, you can use restaurant takeout plastic trays. I've used all of those with great success. This year I'm just going to stick to one thing, and that is these trays. I might use these as well for some things that need to be transplanted, but I'll put these on. These are on my website actually, so if you go to my website, I'll put the link below, go to Products I Love, and you'll find these. And why I love these is because they come with not only 40 cells in a tray, but each one has a watering basin, so you put the water in here and you set the seed tray in it. Now, I'll get into this in a minute, but you actually dump this water out. You don't want your seeds sitting in water. But it's nice to have this to hold the water while they're soaking it up. It's also nice to catch any water, so if you're growing them inside on something, it's not leaking water all over the place. They also come with a humidity dome that slips right over, and this keeps the moisture in while you're waiting for germination. So this all comes as one unit, and again, they're on my website. So other than the planting medium and what you're actually putting that medium in, there's a couple of other considerations when trying to plant or sow seeds. Number one is light, which we talked about in the last video, so I'm not going to go over it again, but you need a light that's bright enough or that's close enough to the actual leaves to be able to have them grow, not get leggy. If you get leggy seedlings, they're pretty much toast and you need to start over. So just setting that, even as big of windows as these are and as sunny as they are in the afternoon, it's still not enough to sustain the growth of the seedlings for anything past maybe 3 days once they're out of the soil surface. The next is humidity and moisture. When these seeds are not up yet, before they germinate, you do want something like this on top to keep the moisture in. And then as soon as 50% of your seedlings have pushed through the soil, you need to remove this. Because if you keep the moisture in after that, You're going to have problems like damping off, where the seedling literally rots almost at the base, at the soil level, and falls over. They're done at that point. You'll get algae, mold, mildew. It's all bad. You'll encourage fungus gnats, and if you've ever had fungus gnats before, they're no fun to deal with, especially indoors. I do have a video on how to get rid of those though. I'll link it down below. But it's best to just avoid that. So once the seedlings have germinated, remove the cover, and then when it comes to watering them, you shouldn't have to water your seedlings or your seeds before they germinate. If you have something like this on top, keeps enough moisture in, you will not have to water again until after they've germinated. So once they've germinated, you've taken that off, you want to see the top of the soil dry out. So typically it'll become a light tan color rather than a dark blackish brown color. And the reason for that is the same issue. Mold, mildew, fungus gnats, they all have to do with the first 1/4 inch of soil. And if it's dried out, they're not going to have the ability to grow or to reproduce in terms of fungus gnats. So when you see them start to dry out, let the tops dry out completely. The roots are down below. The soil down in these containers are still moist. It's just the surface that is dried out. Now you can help this along by putting out a oscillating fan, just the kind of fan that turns like that, and have it blow across the area. That's going to do two things. It's going to help keep the top of the soil dry. It's also going to give the seedling stems a workout. As they bend in the breeze, they're getting stronger. And so that's important. They're going to be more robust when you put them outside. The best way to water seedlings is from below. You don't want to take, and I see so many people who do this, they take like a spray bottle and they'll water their seeds that way. That's just adding more moisture to the top that we don't want. The best way to do it is with a tray like this, where you can fill this half full with water, place this in there, and let the seed cells soak the water up from the bottom to the top. And then once you see that the top is now damp, take them out, dump out the water, and then put them back in just to keep your growing area nice and neat and dry. These will not be used again until spring. Okay, so now seeds that I'm going to be sowing indoors, and then seeds that prefer to be sown directly in the ground. So as I go through what I'm growing here, I've got 2 salad mixes. Now these are not head lettuce. This is a European mesclun mix, and then a leaf lettuce mix, all different colors. All of these are pretty much cut and come again, which means as they grow, you can cut them and they will keep producing more. They are not a head type lettuce. So these I'm going to just sprinkle outside because they can be more thickly grown, more densely planted than a head lettuce, because they really just kind of grow together and you're cutting them all the time. Another thing I'll be sowing directly outside is the flowering carrot. They are members of the carrot family. They don't like to be transplanted. But I'm also just going to be sprinkling them around in different areas just to be a companion plant. These will attract good insects like lacewings, hoverflies that are going to not only good pollinators, but they will take care of some of the insects like aphids and things like that will affect your garden. So some other things I will be planting directly in the garden are peas. Peas do not like to be transplanted, and you plant so many of them so close together that it just financially is not feasible to plant them in this, because I'll plant a row of 200 peas. That would take several of these trays. So those will be going outside, and carrots as well. A lot of root vegetables don't care to be transplanted. Now carrots are on the line. They really don't like to be transplanted. However, they need a lot of moisture to germinate. And if you live in a climate where right now it's raining outside every so often, then these would be great. The best advice I have is to plant these or sow these directly where you're going to grow them. If you live in a dry climate like I do, then carrots are very difficult to germinate outside. I did a video on a couple of tricks on how to do that. I'll link it down below. But what I'm going to be doing, I think I will use these cups to plant the carrots in, or to sow the carrots in, so that I can just stick these in the ground. And I'll take advantage of being able to control the moisture by them being indoors. And then hopefully just planting these out and everything will be fine. This will be the first time I'm doing this, so I will keep you up to date on how that works. Set those aside with that pot. All right, now, the things I am gonna be sowing in these trays. This is a lettuce tennis ball that is miniature tennis ball size head. So it is head lettuce, but they're small. So I'm gonna be sowing these indoors. A couple of cabbages, the Chinese cabbage and a late flat Dutch cabbage. These are both head cabbages. Well, all cabbages are heads, but they do produce heads, and so they need to be spaced a certain amount. And it's just easier if you want to get these started indoors to then take the plug and be able to plant them spaced how they're supposed to be spaced. Beets are a root vegetable that really doesn't mind being started indoors or transplanted. And I'm gonna plant probably 3 or 4 beets per cell. Now, beets do grow to a certain size. Let's say my favorite size beet is a golf ball size. In my opinion, that's when they're the most flavorful and the most tender. But the thing about beets is you can still plant 3 or 4 in a cell this size, and as they grow, they will just kind of push each other out of the way. They really don't get bothered by, unless you have like 20 of them all on top of each other. But 3 or 4 spaced every 8 to 12 inches, you're gonna be totally fine there. And then the last thing I'm gonna be planting today and getting started indoors is my rainbow Swiss chard. So if you are using a peat mixture, and this is peat moss, and I mixed in some perlite for drainage. Now, peat, it depends how you get it. If it comes and it's already slightly moist in the bag, then it's pretty easy to just kind of put some water in there and massage it around and get that water mixed in. If it comes like this bag did, and it is completely dry, peat is hard to get wet. It is hydrophobic, meaning it's hard to get it wet. And so what you can do if you're finding that issue is you can pour boiling water into the peat, stir it around, and that heat will help the peat absorb that moisture. Once it's fully absorbed, and it kind of clings together just a little bit, and you can kind of move it apart with your hands, it's ready to be planted in. You do not want to sow your seeds into dry peat. That is a big mistake, because when you go to water them, it's just gonna kind of float away with the water, either that or it's not gonna soak it up. It'll take several hours just for a tray like this to soak up the water. And there still might be little dry chunks throughout the mix, which is not good when the roots are starting to grow. So I think I'm gonna plant the carrots first. Now imagine how carrots grow. Let me get some mix in here first. Now carrots don't want to be covered up. Therein lies the problem when you're trying to sow carrot seeds outdoors in a dry environment. They need moisture, but they also don't want to be covered. And so the problem is the top dries out very quickly. So that's why I'm growing them indoors, because I can keep that humidity dome on and keep that moisture in. Then once they've germinated, I can put them outside, because their roots go down pretty quickly. When a seed sprouts, it immediately sends down a taproot to get deeper moisture. And so you're not really concerned anymore if the top 1/4 inch is wet or dry, because the root is below that. So carrots, if you think about how wide this is. Now these carrots are Carota carrots, and it's the seed plant spacing is about 2 inches apart. So you figure, you want the carrots to grow without hitting each other. So 2 inches is a good spacing. So in this pot, I could probably have 4 carrots growing along the edge, because once this goes in the ground, they'll have plenty of room to grow. I'm not gonna worry too much about this, but I'm going to put a couple of seeds around the edge, maybe like here, 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 and here. I'm barely going to cover them with just a little bit of the peat mix. They're barely covered at all. I think I'll do an experiment. I love experimenting because I want to know next year, the best way to do things. And so I think I'm gonna try the board method, which if you look at that video on how to sow carrots outdoors, you'll see what I mean. But I'm gonna try something like that outdoors, and I'm gonna try, just because carrots don't necessarily like to be transplanted, I wanna know if this way of doing it is gonna be better or worse than the other way of doing it. Now, it's very rare that you get 100% germination in your seeds. As the seeds get older, the more first couple of years you might get 100%, but as the years pass, you're going to get less and less of a percentage of germination rate. And so, if the seeds are more than a year old, you want to plant a couple of seeds in each spot, just as backup, an insurance policy in case one doesn't sprout, the second one will. And if they both sprout, then you know what? You can thin them, or you can pull one out and transplant it somewhere else. So another thing I'm growing for ornamental purposes and to attract pollinators are sweet peas. Now, sweet peas are grown for the flowers, even though they have pea pods that look exactly like the edible kind. You don't want to plant these anywhere near your edible peas because you don't want to get them confused. Every part of this plant is poisonous, including the pea pods and the peas inside. So just keep them far apart. Not that they're going to pass the poison on to the other one, but you don't want to, when you're picking, if they're growing together, get some of these in your harvest and then cook them and eat them. That would be bad. So with sweet peas, you want to soak the seeds overnight. So I was soaking these overnight in water, and it just softens up the seed coating and allows for faster germination. So now I'm going to fill one of these trays. I'm going to fill this whole tray with sweet pea seeds. Now you want to make sure that these are firmed down because there's a lot of airspace in this tray. So just take a second one and just press down all over to make sure that you've pressed all the airspace out, the space that the roots would come in contact with a dry area. And the sweet peas actually need to be planted 1/4 to 1/2 of an inch deep. So I'm going to go ahead and just put the seeds in here and then put some soil over because there's about 1/4 to 1/2 inch space between the top of the tray and where I've pressed the soil down to. And again, I'm going to put 2 seeds in each cell. Now with sweet peas, you really don't have to thin them. If you're putting 2 and they both come up, they're still going to do just fine in that lessened amount of space between them. As long as it's just 2. If it's 4 or 5, then you might need to thin them out a bit. And it doesn't matter if the seed lands perfectly in the center of the cell or on the edge. It will work itself out and be fine. You don't have to be that precise when it comes to sowing your seeds. Okay. Now I'm just going to fill the rest of these up to the top. We'll be good to go. Now remember to label your seeds because while I could probably tell these are sweet peas, again, I don't want to get them mixed up with regular peas, but some other seedlings, and especially if you're new to all of this, aren't quite as easy to identify, and you're not going to remember which ones are which. You might have different growing requirements after you set them outside. Now this soil is pretty moist. I don't need to water it again before putting the lid on them. So they're in their tray. And on goes the humidity dome. And again, this dome is only on here until we get 50% germination. And then it is removed, never to be put back again. Now you guys all know that I love and use the Viper Spectra. I've been using the XS 4000 for what, 3 months now? Absolutely love it. All of the Viper Spectra products that I have tried are great. And I know, because I've heard from several of you who bought the product on my recommendation and you love it as well, which is always great to hear. Now the thing about seedlings or seeds is right now, they don't need to have light. Some seeds need light, and for those you don't cover them at all, and just the ambient light from around is enough. Most seeds don't need light at all, so you really don't need to turn your grow lights on until you're just about to hit the first germination date. So if it's germinating, if the germination is 7 to 10 days, right about that 6th day, I would go ahead and turn your light on, because as soon as those leaves break the soil surface, they need to start collecting sunlight or grow light. And so you want to make sure, you don't have to turn it on at the beginning, but make sure right before they're supposed to germinate, you do turn them on. And check it every day, because if they're early, you want to flip that light on. I now have a much bigger area than I've ever had in my whole life to grow crops. And so I need to start more seeds than I've ever started before. So this one grow light is not going to cut it. So Viper Spectra actually just sent me a new one to try. It is the new Pro Series. Pulling it out of the box right now. This is the P4000. So I'm going to actually get started with that today with the rest of my seeds that I'm going to start. And I will, the next time we talk, I'm going to show you the difference, or talk about the differences between this and the XS series. One of the great things I love about all the Viper Spectra products is they have the dimming knob, which takes it from 5% strength all the way up to 100%. All right, let's go back and get some more seeds going. So if you didn't watch the last video and wondering why I'm sowing seeds indoors when it's not cold outside, it's perfectly warm enough, I thought seed sprouting indoors was for late winter, early spring. Well, you're right about that. However, cool season crops require cool season temperatures to germinate. And right now, it's 90 degrees outside. So all of these cool season plants are going to want to germinate in temperatures that you yourself are comfortable in. So anywhere from the 60s to 75, 80 would be pushing it. It'll work, but you're going to get much better germination with those temperatures. If you have it warmer than that, so if you did start them outside, I hope you have a long growing season, because they're going to sit there and they're not going to germinate until the weather has cooled down enough outside. And that may or may not give you enough time to get a harvest before freezes and frosts come to your area. So that's why we're doing that. Now, I'm not going to sit here and plant all my seeds in front of you, because it would be very boring. It's the same exact thing over and over and over again. So I hope this helped, and more than that, I hope that you chose to do a fall garden this year. You won't be sorry. I'm telling you, you're probably gonna like it better than summer. If you've done a fall garden, let me know down below how much easier it is than gardening in the summer. I'll see you guys next time.